that around, and I'd like to genuinely ask you, what do men want?
Nobody deals with any of the really valid issues. And then you get a bunch of anger, and you get a bunch...
She said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. This is public access television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. Today we'll be speaking about the creation of healthy relationships for men and women with David Kuenzli and Linda Smarrella. Stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome to Speaking of Men. This is public access television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, as I said earlier. This is part two of a two-part series that we're doing on the creation of men and women's anger and the creation of healthy relationships. Part one was men and women's anger, and this 30-minute segment will look at the creation of healthy relationships. Our guests today are David Kuenzli, once again, and Linda Smarrella, and both are social workers and therapists, psychotherapists, working with men's and women's issues. And if you catch the end of the show, we will have a number that you can get in touch with them at if you're interested in any of the programs or projects. Welcome back, guys, for part two.
Good to be
here. I guess we're going to be talking about dealing healthy relationships. And of course, I say, in defining healthy relationships, you also have to know what an unhealthy relationship is. So would either one of you like to give us a definition of either? You know, what's healthy and what's... I mean, that's a big deal in society these days. You know, what is healthy and what isn't. And, an aside that I'd like to put in here is I found a lot of times it seems like I'm looking for a little experience, strength, and hope, and I get psychoanalyzed. You know, there's so much pop psychology around these days. So,
Michael, let me start. I think that a healthy relationship really requires two people who feel good about themselves. Mm-hmm. I think it's difficult to have a healthy relationship if one or the other person has low self-esteem, doesn't like themselves, feels is constantly being critical of themselves. Because what happens if I really don't like myself, I'm not going to believe you when you say you love me. Because what's wrong with you that you would love somebody that I don't love? And I think that's sort of the predicament we have in relationships. So I think the underlying premise is that we have to really have two people who like themselves and also have a healthy respect for each other. I think without that, I think it's very difficult to talk about healthy relationships. What would you add, Linda?
Well, I just want to emphasize something. I think that the self-esteem issue is number one. And I think that goes back to the thing that most of us as men and women have actually taken on our parents' low self-esteem and their own shame, as Bradshaw talks about, and that this just keeps being carried on generationally, and until we really change that by doing things like taking self-esteem courses and being in men's and women's groups and being in therapy and really beginning to do our own inner child work and healing that wounded inner child, that we're going to keep on perpetuating unhealthy relationships That's both what we need to do and why I think we have unhealthy relationships.
So a healthy relationship should be empowering then for both people. It
Yes.
should be. It's not. It would not be codependent to believe that if you were in a relationship with someone that you should be a source of power and enhancement for one another. That you should be able to turn to each other for strength and support. And that's not disease, right?
No, I think that's healthy. I think if the way I think about healthy relationships is that let's say there's a nurturing parent inside of me, and if I am good at nurturing the parts of me that feel vulnerable, then most of the time I'm going to feel good about myself. In a relationship, it's nice to have somebody else who can also nurture me when I'm feeling vulnerable, when I'm feeling scared. And it's nice for the other person too, when I have a nurturing parent that can respond to them. But for the most part, we each need to be doing that ourselves.
Right.
I'd like to add something to that
So
too.
so each person should be able to take care of themselves and have some sense of identity. And it shouldn't be, you should be able to say me as well as you. I mean, you should be able to be there for yourself as well as not be so needy as to not be able to give to the other person when they're down and out.
And I think that it's really important to realize that we don't have to fix our partner to be able to listen to their pain and sorrow and whatever else it is that they're feeling. We don't have to take that on. We don't have to come up with a solution. And I think in a healthy relationship, we learn how to do that by really listening empathically to the other person without having to get in there with an answer to do something about it.
You know, that's one of the big men's issues, I think, that I've heard, where the woman is upset and the guy's, well, what's wrong, honey? What'd I do? You know, and really there's nothing wrong. She has gas, man. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, so it's, you know, the point I'm making is this whole thing of men wanting to take on responsibility for the way the woman is feeling, rather, you know, that somehow they can control that.
I think this, I'm not sure it's wanting to take it on, but I think we have a sense that we're supposed to fix things.
Right.
And we get very uncomfortable if the woman in our life is upset, if she's crying, because we feel like we must be doing something wrong, and we got to get in there and fix it, but we don't often have the slightest idea how to fix it, how to help her with her feelings.
Right. Let's pause for a moment and take a look at our weekly tip from ParentCraft on parenting. We'll be right back.
I love the way you say that.
I know. Give lots of praise for effort as well as accomplishment. Look for achievement even in small tasks, and praise your child often. Let your child know that trying hard is even more important than winning.
Now, we had this stereotyping and gender thing. You guys want to get into that at all?
Want to explore that?
No.
You know?
Well, I mean, I think we've got it.
Welcome back. This is Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. Our guests today are David Kuenzli and Linda Smarrella. And we're talking about healthy relationships. And the opening of the program, we were trying to get a little bit of a definition on what was healthy and what's not. What are some of are there some mileposts or markers for defining healthy relationships that you guys can think of?
Well, I think one of the things that comes to mind is flexibility. I think traditional relationships, and most of us, our parents came out of traditional relationships. The notion was that if you were male, you did certain things. If you were female, you did certain things. And that you came together in a relationship to make a whole relationship. What we think much more now is that two people need to be whole people. They need to be able to do a number of different things, and that our gender doesn't define what we do in a relationship. And so the ability for both of us to be flexible, if you're better at balancing the checkbook and you're a woman, then that's fine with me. And if I'm better at cooking meals, then that's fine with you. And there's that give and take and a sense of flexibility.
You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting to me that was pointed out, Robert Moore was saying that just because there's trouble in a relationship doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. The very nature of relationships is storming. And what seems to be necessary is that commitment to stay in it and work through it. Got any things to say on that, Linda Smarrella?
Well, I think that flexibility is a big issue, and I think that learning to be flexible and recognizing that though we're different, it doesn't mean that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. And that's where I think understanding the difference in communication styles is real helpful. I think that it's important to know that because I'm more interested in process and feelings and not so interested in necessarily stuff and things, as my sister-in-law used to say, that I'm wrong for that or that you're wrong for that if you do it another way. So I think being able to really listen to each other as individuals, as humans, and not say, oh my gosh, I don't think that way, or I don't feel that way, or I don't talk that way, and then feel wrong about it is a big step.
Where does love fit into all this?
Good question.
Yeah. Oh, love!
Well, I think, to me, love is both a feeling and it's a way of treating each other, and it's a way of acting. Let me say a little bit about the feeling. I think that in a loving relationship, there's a sense of respect for the other person. I really like who you are. I really love who you are. I don't need to change you. I think that's a big piece of a healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. Each of us really appreciates who the other person is, and in a sense, when we appreciate someone, there is that sense of loving and just openness. So I think it's not only that kind of feeling, but it's also a commitment that I'm going to treat you in loving ways. If I'm upset with you and angry at you, I'm still going to treat you with respect. I'm not going to put you down. I'm not going to try to dominate you or persuade you that I'm right. So there's a willingness to act in loving ways. And I think a good deal of what love is how we act toward each other.
I think another important thing about true love is that it really honors.
Now we got love, and now we've got true love.
That's right.
So,
I think they talk about all of these different kinds of love, and Scott Peck does a wonderful job in his book On the Road Less Traveled, talking about the different kinds of love. But I think that in a truly loving relationship, whether it's an intimate, partnered relationship or just with friends, that we want the very best for that other person. We truly want whatever they need to be all of who they can be.
And that's not codependence?
I don't think it is,
well,
no.
I think
there's so much of that, there's so much of that pop psych stuff going around.
I think the additional piece that I would put in is that I want what's best for you, and I also want what's best for me.
Yes.
And that if we're going to have a relationship, it needs to meet both of those criteria, yes. That what we're doing is good for both of us. Mm-hmm. If it's good for you, but I'm giving up myself or I'm sacrificing myself, I think in the long run that doesn't work.
But do you have to give up something? Both people have to give something up for the sake of the relationship. Don't you?
Yeah,
I mean, each person has to.
I think you need to make choices. If I choose to be in this relationship, I'm choosing not to be in other relationships. Mm-hmm. I'm choosing to spend time with you rather than do other things. So I think there are lots of choices along the way, and in that sense, making a choice to do something means giving up something else. But I think we're beyond the point in understanding healthy relationships where the major notion is sacrifice, that if I love you, I should be willing to give up all these other things that I want in my life and be unhappy. I think in a loving relationship, it should make us, it should add to our lives rather than take away from it.
You bet it should. Mm-hmm. You bet it should. Mm-hmm. And got anything, Linda?
No, I just feel in total agreement. I like that addition.
Old Carl Jung said that ideals are alive and they're eternal, and that when you begin to deal with ideals, they possess you. You don't possess them. And love is certainly an ideal. Mm-hmm. It seems to be the lesson of this particular reality. I don't know. There's something. I always liked the John Philip Law line. He played the blind angel in Barbarella, where he was an angel, and he said, an angel doesn't love, an angel is love. Of course, that's one of those talk is cheap things. The reality of taking that love day to day and keeping it alive and nurturing it is a real responsibility.
I think another element of a healthy relationship is a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. I think in a good intimate relationship, we should be able to laugh a lot and not take ourselves too seriously. I think that sense of humor goes a long way toward dealing with the troubles that come inevitably to relationships.
So there should be some fun and good
There should be
times
some
in
fun,
there.
you bet.
I think the other thing is to let go of expectations as much as possible. To really know that our partner or our friends, whoever we're talking about being in relationship with, are not necessarily going to behave, think, or feel exactly as we think they should act, think, or feel. And that really saves a lot. It's like be here now, be in the present, be with this person because you really love who they are and love being with them. So,
Yeah. Hey, we're talking about a lot of things here. One of them that had you guys had mentioned that I thought was interesting was this idea that some of the problems that relationships have is that men and women are stereotyped growing up. Did you want to touch on that real quick?
Sure, I'd be glad to say something about that. I think there's some pretty strong stereotypes about what little boys are, what little girls are, how young boys and girls should act, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. And I think, for example, with boys, by the time we're 6 or 7 years old, we begin to get the sense that our feelings are not nearly as important as our ability to do, to fix things, to think. And so we lose touch with a very important aspect of who we are. And then we get in relationships when we grow up, and women are saying, I want to know your feelings. And we're going, what do you mean? What feelings? And we feel really inadequate and vulnerable as a result of not getting a lot of good encouragement and training to identify and express our feelings in childhood. How about for girls? What happens with them?
well, I think that we are expected to be able to take care of our men. And we are raised in a very different way than men are. I think we are expected to be kind of smothered at home, that we're not given the same kinds of freedoms. And we are somehow taking this then into our relationship with men. It's like, well, you're supposed to take care of me. And I think that brings up a lot of problems then for both women and men.
I think we both wind up feeling like you're not doing a good enough job of taking care of me in the things that I didn't think I could take care of myself in. And so we wind up being angry at each other because you're not doing... They promised me that you would take care of my feelings and make me feel good. And you're not doing that, so oftentimes men can get angry at women.
You know, some I'd like to touch on real quick here, that the relationships between men and women usually are about the child and the hearth and the home. And a tremendous amount of America right now is trying to, is obviously addressing the fact that a great part of our generation, a great number, missed something in growing up. There was a father absent, there was a mother, something happened where that thing wasn't functioning. And one of the things I'm interested in seeing a dialogue develop between aware men and women about what's happening, is being able to take the child out of that emotionally charged, insane environment that causes so much damage as we're going along. I think that, I don't think that, I guess in gay relationships you can talk about, you know, women and women, men and men. But for a lot of America, that has to do with the man and the woman, and the third is the child. And that whole concept of holy union and that coming together and that looking at it, man, that's you know, that's the life force, and that's the magic for us as human beings. That's where the whole thing turns around. So I think in developing a dialogue here and beginning to try and look at what is happening with men now as we begin to be aware. You know, the women at the Rape Crisis Center started their program back in the early 70s. You know, I was at Okies drinking like a fish in the early 1970s. I had no more consciousness of myself as a man other than the things that had been handed me. So I think we owe a lot to women, you know, for opening those doors and making us question some of the stuff and giving us the ability to not be women so much as to begin to become men and who we are and regain our identity. So you got anything else to say about stereotypes, do you?
Well, I'd just like to say I hope that the men's movement, the women's movement enables all of us to really be able to be who we are individually.
That's the point, isn't it?
And just to honor and delight in that, and as Bradshaw says, you know, really delight in the wonder child within. And
You
that's
bet.
helpful.
Well, that's a rose is a rose is a rose, right? I mean, David is David, and Linda is Linda, and hopefully Mike is Mike. We'd like to go to a short tape now, take a look at what Amnesty International has to say, and we'll be right back.
A rose is a rose is a rose.
Isn't that the old...
What if I told you that the government of the United States had been overthrown and the new regime had issued laws saying that you could be arrested because your father was a trade union member? You lent your motorcycle to the wrong person. You're watching this program.
Impossible? We at Amnesty International know that no political system automatically protects human rights. Amnesty International has helped to bring about the release of tens of thousands of prisoners of conscience, people imprisoned and often tortured or executed just for holding the wrong political views, expressing the wrong opinions, believing in the wrong religions, or belonging to the wrong ethnic groups. Join us.
To get more information, please write to us. Amnesty International USA, Post Office Box 37137, Washington, D.C. 20013.
Amnesty International is a conspiracy of hope.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. I'm your host, Mike Rivas, and we're talking today with David Kuenzli and Linda Smarrella. We are talking about healthy relationships, and one of the things I was hoping we might take a look at as we begin the last segment of the program is what can men and women begin to do to develop a little bit healthier relationships.
Well, I think, as I've been implying, that one of the things that we need to do is to start doing our own recovery work. We need to start going to CODA groups or ACA groups or into our own individual therapy or men's groups or women's groups, and to begin to really learn about how we were wounded as children and to begin to take care of ourselves in a more healthy way, learn how to build our self-esteem. And what else do you see?
Well, I think learning to communicate more effectively between each other. Understanding that men and women have many differences and that differences can add to our relationships if we are willing to listen and really understand how we're different. And one of the things, Mike, that Linda and I do are creating healthy relationships workshops where men and women, some of them are married, some of them are not in relationships, come, and we spend a lot of time looking at what is healthy communication. How do we learn, what kind of skills do we need to know in order to have communication between men and women that is really healthy. A lot of this has to do with our really understanding ourselves. What are the things inside that we haven't been able to put into words very well?
A lot of unconscious stereotypes and agendas that are running us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not aware of the things that you know that are in here. You know what you were saying, of course, is that, and I guess what you're both saying, and the message for the 90s is for both men and women, sort of, is at some point you got to make a commitment to stand, you know, and to realize what's happening to you, and to begin that journey into here, and to begin to deal with the things that have shaped you to this point, and kind of become unnumb from the neck down. So you guys are doing some. I talked to someone in northern New Mexico, and they told me they had a workshop up there. Had a couple of hundred men and women show up and spent 2 or 3 days just exploring that stuff. Is it pretty much fun, or?
Oh, it's great.
It's also a bit on the scary side. I think when you get a lot of men and women together, and we haven't really talked very much about some of these deeper issues, I think there's a lot of fear that comes up. You know, it's like, what's going to happen? What are they going to say? How are we going to react? Are we going to feel rejected? Are we going to feel empowered? And I think what we're about is creating workshops where men and women can begin to articulate their deeper feelings in a safe way, in a way that they feel that somebody else is really listening and understanding what's going on inside of them. And
I think that's the important thing, really being heard by each other is what's been exciting. It's scary to men, perhaps, but I think it's exciting. I think it's just a wonderful thing that's happening. And I delight in doing it, and doing it with David. It's wonderful.
So this is both married and unmarried people
yes.
that get together. And I mean, Is it a mixed group, or do you have married people in a group and then unmarried people in a group?
Both.
They're mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is not a place you go fish. This is a place you go and work on issues,
Mm-hmm.
right?
In a sense, what we're fishing for in these groups is men fishing for what's the woman's experience? What's going on with her? Because I don't really understand her. And the women are. It's an opportunity for them also to hear men talk about themselves.
Right. Well, you know, there's so much. The show here excites me a little bit, and I think I've said this to you guys before, maybe on this program, is that there is such a dark area out there, and there between men and women, between the sexes, there's so much projection and blame, and the fact that it seems the media never, it's like Thelma and Louise. You know, it's the little feature that the Journal Trib did in there was one of the first things on men's and women's issues I've seen where they did anything in depth, you know. Most of what it is just a caricature and its surface, and you never get in there. And we're just not clear in what we can't say, and what is in here runs us, man, because, it's a part of the link of a chain that holds us down. If people wanted to get in touch with you guys, they would give you a call. Where would they do that at?
To get a hold of me, call 889-9730 and ask for David Kuenzli.
Right.
And to get a hold of me, Linda Smarrella, you'd call 281-2590 and leave a message on my answer machine, or get the real me.
Right.
Rare, but...
If you had one real quick word of advice to men on how they might approach relationships, what would it be?
Get in touch with your feelings and be able and have the courage to tell your mate what you feel.
Right. And how about you? If you had one word to women, what would
Okay, and that's be the change that you want in the man in your life. Model what it is that you want.
Right. If you had one quick one to women as a man, what would you say?
Don't believe for a moment that men don't have a lot of feelings inside. The important thing is to really find ways of listening to them and help them find ways of articulating what they're feeling.
Okay. How about you, Linda, for men?
Be patient with us. Honor and listen, and know that we do have something important to say underneath all the verbiage.
Well, I'd like to thank David Kuenzli and Linda Smarrella for coming down and sharing a couple of programs with us. I hope you guys are a little more clear. I certainly am. We will be on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. Check your paper for listings. I would like to remind you guys and girls out there in the wide world to please stand if you can, run if you got to, but don't you quit. Thank you guys for coming down here.
Thanks, Mike.
We'll probably just stay here for a little bit, and they roll the credits, take about a minute.